Okay, we're ready to start. Today we're doing Chatichah ChaNaN, part 2. In part 1, we did, there's going to be no slideshow today, sorry for you, everybody who's out there watching. In the first part we spoke about some of the basic halachas, we'll consider the basic halachas of ChaNaN. And today we're going to go through exceptions. I break it down to 7 different types of exceptions, or possible exceptions, when we should or should not say ChaNaN. Okay, so the first one is something that it says in Aruch, and that is that we own ChaNaN, the Midiraisa, ChaNaN is only by batel Chalav, and it's a Midrabanan. We say that ChaNaN applies the Shari Issur also so as to not confuse it with batel Chalav, and therefore the only time it applies is when something is similar to batel Chalav, which is something that's Issur at the time that it got mixed together. So what if we have something that's not Issur at the time it got mixed together? It was Heter. Like it was milk, so milk was kosher. It's not Issur right now, so then that's not done with the batel Chalav, and therefore there's no ChaNaN in that case. So what does that mean? If we have some kind of a beverage has 10% milk in it, and an ounce of that falls into something else, then we don't say that an ounce of the beverage, an ounce of tray fell into the thing, but rather a tenth of an ounce fell in. And so for the Bitul, we make the cheshbon of the Bitul based on the amount of milk that's in there, because that's how much is in there. We don't say ChaNaN and say the whole beverage became Issur. Okay, so that's a pretty simple, straightforward case. Of course, the case relevant to us is about Chalav stam. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's going to be our third thing. Okay, but that's the first thing, which is when it's Heter, then there's no ChaNaN. Now, not so the case in Shulchan Aruch of Heter, the simple case is batel or Chalav, of course not together. Batel or Chalav, there's no ChaNaN. There's no ChaNaN since they're both Heter. But there's another din, which is that not only that, but if you have Chametz before Pesach, there's also no ChaNaN. Chametz before Pesach is Issur, like in the dinim of Libun, we say that it's considered Issur Bala, and it is Issur. But even though it's Issur Bala, at the time that the Chametz falls in, if today Chametz had fallen into a food, there's nothing, it's not Issur to eat it. So in that way, it's not doimed to batel Chalav. And since it's not doimed to batel Chalav, that's a really good enough reason to not say, ChaNaN. Good to have a live person. I have 2 other guys, but okay. That's a reason to not say ChaNaN. So we're talking about that. Okay, so an actual example, no slideshow today, because sorry. An example of it is, if you have infant formula. Okay, so infant formula, we'll go say, in every, there's a few grams of a vitamin premix in that formula, and in the vitamin premix is vitamin C. And let's say that the vitamin C was Chametz, which it probably isn't, but let's say it was. Okay, the vitamin C is 1/50th of that premix that goes into the formula. Okay, so if and then the premix is not batel b'shishim into the whole formula. So for every 100 grams, maybe let's say 3 grams of vitamin premix. So if we were to say ChaNaN, then the premix would have been considered to be Issur. The premix would have been said it's only 1/50th. The vitamin C is not batel b'shishim. It would be Issur, and then the premix itself would not be batel into the formula. Since we don't say ChaNaN for Chametz before Pesach, the dilution happened before Pesach, so there's no ChaNaN for Chametz before Pesach because it's considered Heter. At that time, there's no Issur to it, it's not done with batel Chalav, and therefore you're allowed to use that formula on Pesach. And since the Chametz is overall batel, even though ChaNaN-wise it would have not been batel. Okay. Now that's only true for Chametz when it's Heter, when you're allowed to eat the Chametz. What happens when it comes to time that you're not allowed to eat Chametz, meaning the 4th hour of Pesach when you can't eat Chametz? At that point, it becomes regular ChaNaN like any other Issur. Okay. What happens in the opposite case? What happens if it's on Pesach? Now Chametz is b'mashu. That's a little more complicated. We're going to talk about, there's 2 possible reasons why ChaNaN might not apply in that case. One is to do with something called Trey Mashahu, that's Rich Hashem for Sim Kuf Beis, and then another we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay, so that's Chametz for Pesach. Okay, so now back to our first case of Heter. Which was milk. That's the case the Rama says. When if you have milk, there's no ChaNaN because it's Heter. Okay, it's not done with batel Chalav. Okay, so the Pri Chodesh says that since ChaNaN b'shar Isurim is only Drabanan, he says, so it doesn't apply when we're talking about an Issur Drabanan. Okay, it only applies when we're talking about an Issur D'Oraisa. For something that's really Asma D'Oraisa, we have Neveilah. We have, I don't know, we're going to talk about in a second about Dam. Something that's really treif, so if something that's Asma D'Oraisa, then we say we should be Midrabanan, and this Chatichah is Neveilah. What happens when we have something that's only Asma Midrabanan? Then we wouldn't say ChaNaN. Okay, the way Rav Moshe explains it is, he says that we're being machmir for a shita that there should be ChaNaN b'shari surim, so we're machmir when it's a shayv v'deraisa. When it's a shayv v'derabanan, we don't have to be machmir for that. That those who hold that ChaNaN b'shari surim. That's what the Heter says. The Taz says you should know that the Ramah says not, he brings a right from our mother. Ramah doesn't hold like that. The Heter himself is maskim that the Ramah doesn't agree with him about this thing. That you do say ChaNaN even by Issur and D'Orabanan. And the Shach also says you should be machmir. And the Pri Megadim says hachin hilchasa that you should be machmir. The chalil lahakol. Okay, he says no, don't buy this thing. The Pri Heter says that you should be makel about ChaNaN by Issur and D'Orabanan. So Rav Moshe says that's true. That's what you should do. You should have to be machmir ChaNaN by Issur and D'Orabanan. But he says, the Ramah himself tells you that in a case when it's lach balach, the makom hefsid you could be makel. So we all know that when the Ramah says the makom hefsid you could be makel, he really means is that ikar din it's mutter. So much says, so if it's an Issur D'Orabanan and it's lach balach, then you could be mutter even l'chatchila. He says, all that much to be machmir, you don't have to be. We're machmir talking by ChaNaN for Issur D'Orabanan. We would be machmir for lach balach, but to be machmir ChaNaN b'Issur D'Orabanan by lach balach, he says that's too much. Okay. Now, Rav Moshe's case that he's talking about was stam yain. So it's Issur D'Orabanan, it's stam yain, and it's lach balach. So Rav Moshe says you don't have to be machmir for that. So Rav Moshe said, most people don't go with Rav Moshe said. They would be machmir for ChaNaN even by lach balach and even by stam yain. He says, but that's only by stam yain. But when it came to Chalav Akum, then there's an extra reason to be mekel. Why? Because the Pri Megadim, remember the Pri Megadim is the one who said was so strong how you should be machmir for Issur D'Orabanan. The Pri Megadim says you don't have to be machmir for ChaNaN balach by Chalav Akum. Okay? And he says it's a tzir for a bunch of things. He says first of all, some hold that Chalav Akum is batel b'roiv. That's not how we pass it. We pass it as batel b'shishim. But some hold it's batel b'roiv. If it's batel b'roiv means in the original mixture it was already mutter. There's no ChaNaN because there was no Neveilah because in the first mixture it was already mutter. And some people say balach is mutter. And he says, and anyhow nowadays there's no treif milk anyhow. He says, and go look at what I wrote in Siman Kuf Tesvav. Okay, now unfortunately there's no Pri Megadim in Siman Kuf Tesvav. Okay, he never made it. So we don't know what he was pointing at. But it happens to be the Pri Megadim is talking about a Radvaz and a Pri Chodesh, okay, and everybody says people say over that the Pri Chodesh says there's no ChaNaN by Chalav Akum. It's not really true. The Pri Chodesh and the Radvaz that he's bringing don't say a word about ChaNaN, okay, and the reason why they don't say anything about that is because they both hold that there's no Issur of Chalav Akum when treif milk is not available. Those are the people who hold like that. So for them, Chalav Akum wasn't such a concern because it's not really available, so it wasn't such a concern. But we don't know what the Pri Megadim meant when he said that. Right? But the Pri Megadim says you shouldn't be machmir about ChaNaN for lach balach if it's Chalav Akum. Okay, you shouldn't be machmir Chalav Akum. So Rav Belsky said this. He says, we're even a step better than that because we don't even have Chalav Akum. We have Chalav stam, what we call Chalav stam. That some people even hold as mutter. So let's think about what we have over here. The Pri Heter says that there's no ChaNaN by Issur D'Orabanan. Okay, we don't hold like that. Rav Moshe says, but if it's lach balach, you could be, and in Issur D'Orabanan, you could be mekel. We don't hold like that. The Pri Megadim says, but if it's only Chalav Akum, then you could be mekel. There's other reason to be mekel. So Rav Moshe says, but for Chalav stam is yet another reason to be mekel because lots of people hold that it's really Chalav stam is completely mutter. I mean, they eat it. We give hashgacha to it. So he said you could be mekel for that for Chalav stam. To consider Chalav stam, so to speak, as if it's Heter in this case, and not say ChaNaN. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So we went through a lot of steps over here. Okay, we're saying there's all these reasons to be mekel. So for this case, we're going to be mekel. Okay, so an example of that is it's not a perfect example, but an example of this is coffee creamer. So the coffee creamers that have sodium caseinate in it. Sodium caseinate is milk. And let's say the sodium caseinate was 3%. Okay, I want to make it that the sodium caseinate is not batel. Okay, let's say the sodium caseinate is 3%. So it's not batel. Now the sodium caseinate is put into the sodium. Wait 1 second. Right, so a person. What am I saying over here? Okay, the sodium caseinate is right. Okay, I got it. Sodium is the sodium caseinate is only 3% of the creamer. Got it. And that's how I lost myself over here. Okay, so now the person put in a half an ounce of creamer into his 8-ounce coffee. Okay, so it's not batel b'shishim. It's only 16 times as much. Okay, it's half an ounce into 8 ounces is only 16 times. It's not batel. So if we would say ChaNaN, then the whole creamer is treif or milchids, in which case his whole coffee is the milk is not batel on his coffee. But if we don't say ChaNaN, since we're not going to say ChaNaN on the creamer, so the creamer is only considered to be 3% milchids or 3% treif, whatever you want to call it, 3% something, 3% Chalav stam. So that 3%, of course, is built a zillion times over. It's really 500 times in the coffee that he has. And therefore, the coffee that he has at the end is not milchids, or it's not Chalav stam, whichever one you want to call it. Okay, since we're not saying ChaNaN in that case. Okay, now.
Can you say the same thing that's certified as parv?
No, so we give hashkacha, we can't do that because when we give hashkacha, we can't let it's a variation of a bitul chatchila to say you can put something in that's milchids and it leaves parv. We don't let people do that because if they put it's like a sort of a bitul chatchila. You're putting in something milchids into a food, and in the end it's coming out calling it parv.
But that's not just the parv aspect of it. If it was right, if it was. You said we can't certify it as parv because of people that keep calling Yisrael?
No. We can't certify it as parv because if we put something in that's milchids, even a tiny bit, and then they sell it as parv, I mean, we tell them you can call it as parv when you're selling it. It's a sort of a bitul chatchila. We're putting in something that's not, and selling that it is. We're saying putting in something milchids, and we're selling it as parv. So in your house, you can't put something milchids into something and say, I want this is parv. No, that's bitul chatchila. So it's a sort of a bitul, not exactly, but it's a sort of a bitul chatchila. Okay, actually, just. The other day somebody asked a really unusual. He had to put in something. It's not milchids. It's DE into a product. If I remember the number, it was 1 in 25,000. Okay, it was an enzyme, a tiny little thing for a side little roll, whatever it was. And the poor guy didn't want to have to call it milchids or DE. So what are we supposed to do then now? Because he's putting it in DE, but it's going out. He wants to go out parv. It's a thing that should be parv. Okay, anyhow, fine. So I'm not talking about hashkacha. I'm not talking about hashkacha. I'm talking about the person who's sitting and drinking the coffee. Okay. Now, another thing. I keep saying to you, ChaNaN is b'shar Issur is patu basar b'chalav. Therefore, the Pri Megadim says it only applies to things where the bitul, where the Issur is like basar b'chalav. Where the bitul needs, in order to be mutter, it needs bitul b'shishim like basar b'chalav. So anything that's going to be mutter, if it's batel b'roiv, then there's no ChaNaN either. There's no ChaNaN. If all it takes to be mutter is to be batel b'roiv, then there's no ChaNaN for that issue either. Okay, so his examples are pasakum, or bishalakum, or chemesakum, those things which also are all mutter, they're batel b'roiv. So that means is that in that case there's no ChaNaN. We add another case, which is kidneys, which is also batel b'roiv. So in any of these.
Pasakum, bishalakum, chemasakum.
Chemasakum. He says it's batel b'roiv. Maybe I got that. Did I get that?
Stop. It's chalavakum. What's the issue of chemasakum to chalav?
No. Because chem is in between. It's in between. It's in between chalav and gvina.
It's not really in between. We just don't know if it's awesome mishum chalav or not, right? It's not.
No, I think it's because it's changed from the chol. I might be wrong. I don't remember. But if you look in Kuf Tes Vav Halacha Alpha, it says that it's only batel b'roiv. I might be wrong. Anyhow, so in all those cases, what happens? We had a mixture that was not batel b'roiv. Okay, it was 60% of the food was bishalakum or was kidneys or something like that. So in the food itself is usher. You can't eat it. But if it falls into something else, we don't treat that the thing as ChaNaN. We don't say the whole thing is Issur. No, it's only 60% Issur, and in the bitul, as it moves on, it's only 60% Issur. Now, the Acharon talk about, I'm not going to talk to you about, the Acharon talk about, in these cases, the bitul was easier than basar b'chalav. It was batel b'roiv. All these cases I told you were batel b'roiv, so there's no ChaNaN. What happens if it's more chomer than basar b'chalav, like it's asur b'mashu? Like I told you the case before, Chametz on Pesach, it's asur b'mashu. So should we then say that if it's asur b'mashu, it's not done with the basar b'chalav? It's not like basar b'chalav, because it's not batel b'shishim. They say it's ridiculous. It's more chomer than basar b'chalav. That's a shayla Acharon about that. Okay. There's two other cases for us. One is stam yayin, and the other is gvinas akum. So stam yain is batel b'shisha. Okay, it's not batel b'shishim, it's batel b'shisha. There, I told you a minute ago, Ramosha assumes that we would follow the rules of ChaNaN, except that he thinks it's an Issur Rabbanan, that's who he wants to make. And the reason for that is because stam yain really is batel b'shishim. When we learned about alcoholic beverages, Sim Kufidal, stam yain really is batel b'shishim. Just when it's in a beverage, it's batel b'shisha because it loses its shem yain. It's like a special reason. Like if you put stam yain into food, it's batel b'shishim. So that's probably the reason why people treat stam yain not like this. But Gvinas Akum is an interesting case because Gvinas Akum needs bitul b'shishim, but only some people hold it needs bitul b'shishim. The Shach brings that there are others who hold. I think it's Heter says that it's bitul b'roiv is enough for Gvinas Akum. And the Chacham said the Makom Hefsid you could be samach on that like that. So there's maybe reasons to think that there should be no ChaNaN for Gvinas Akum. Okay, let's put it on the side. Okay, our fifth exception. And like this. First, like the in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Chatichah, it speaks about whether there's ChaNaN for Keilim, which means is what happens if we have a spoon, and I've been using that spoon for 100 years, so there's all kinds of blios inside that spoon, and now a very small amount of Issur comes into contact with this spoon. Okay, an exact amount that I could measure. I know how much Issur came in contact with the food. So should I say, well, the amount of Issur that came in contact, that's how much blia there is of Issur? Because I know exactly how much Issur touched the food. There's a very small amount. I know exactly how much. So if the spoon is used for something else, I'll know exactly how much Issur was in here. Or do I say, no, the small amount of Issur that was there gave time to everything that was inside. It could give time to all the blios that are inside of there. It could be nice and dam into all the blios in the food. And that's a shayla. We're not going to talk about that shayla. That's not the shayla we're going to talk about. That's a shayla on machlokes in Chatichah, but whether it's ChaNaN for the blios that are in the Keilim. But almost everybody agrees that what happens if you have a brand new spoon? Okay, brand new, it was never used. There are no blios in the spoon. Okay, it's brand new. And you put a small amount of Issur onto it, then just about everybody agrees the Kli doesn't become a Neveilah. Only a food can become a Neveilah. So the bli in the Kli, we could talk about whether there's the ChaNaN. Can that become Nasas Neveilah? But the spoon itself is not Nasas Neveilah. Okay, the Kli is not Nasas Neveilah because the Kli is not a food. So it's not Nasas Neveilah. Maybe the blios can become, but if there's no blios, then you don't have to worry about ChaNaN in the spoon. Okay, now that sounds very theoretical. It's like, but it probably is when you learn in Chatichah. It's very theoretical. I mean, who cares about theoretically what happens if you have a spoon? Could the spoon be Chatichah? I never used a spoon before. The very first time I used it, it was very. It seems very theoretical. But I have two cases for you, two actual cases that happened where it came up. Okay, and the first one was in one of a common way to make an amino acid called L-cysteine. It's a bread conditioner, whatever it is. It's a food ingredient. To make L-cysteine is from chicken feathers. And what happened is that the way the chicken feathers were prepared, they had a certain amount of dam in hot water together with the feathers. The feathers are coming not coming from Empire Chicken. You know what I mean? They're coming from a trade place, and there was a certain amount of blood was there. And there's a question that should there be blia of dam into the feathers? L'inyan, if we later on, if these feathers move along in the process, does the dam have to be batel b'shishim, or the feather has to be batel b'shishim? The feather wouldn't have been batel. The dam was very tiny amount, and the dam would have been batel b'shishim. So there, it was decided that the feather is not a food; it's a kli. Even though one day it's going to turn into L-cysteine, but right now it's just a Kli, and therefore since it's a Kli, there's no ChaNaN of the Kli. So the amount of dam that's there, that's how much has to be batel. The whole feather does not have to be batel. Okay, that was one case. The next case is even a bigger stretch, and that was a gum base was made with a non-kosher fatty acid. And gum base, even though lots of people think that chewing gum is edible, but the gum base itself is completely not edible. And therefore, whatever reason there was a mistake, and they were using non-kosher fatty acids. So the question was, should we have to be mevatel the whole gum base? Should we say ChaNaN, and the gum base is treif, or should we say just the fatty acid part of it, the treif part of it is batel? And it said there also that the gum base is not a food, and therefore there's no ChaNaN and Keilim, and therefore you only have to be mevatel the fatty acids, and you don't have to worry about the gum base itself. Okay. Now, our last two things are cases that are, actually, could you hear? Yes, because are cases that are more, have a different practicality. Again, like this. Taisha says the Tosfos that talks about Chatichah Nasa Neveilah, the well-known Tosfos in Tavkuf, in Chulun, who talks about ChaNaN, says that you only say ChaNaN, he brings a rise from the Gemara, you only say ChaNaN after the Neveilah, the Issur is settled into the mixture. Okay? But at that point, once it's all settled, everything is the way it's supposed to be, then we say, now the Chatichah, we look at the Chatichah and say, okay, what's the status of this Chatichah? If it wasn't batel, we say, Chatichah Nas is Neveilah, this Chatichah is Issur, and now if it falls into something else, it stays as Issur. He says, but what happens if it's Sofo l'hispashit? It's in the middle of spreading, it's in the process of spreading around, then we don't say Chatichah Nas is Neveilah. We wait till it's mispashit completely, and then we sit down and say, okay, now what should we do? The way the Pri Megadim says it is, call agav derech hiluchoy, like while it's on the way, loy amina Chatichah Nas is Neveilah. We don't say Chatichah Nas is Neveilah till while it's going. We wait till it's finished, and now we say, okay, now we have a Chatichah in front of us, and now we say, now what's the status of this? It's Issur, so now with 100% Issur, in the next Bitul that's going to happen. Now, Rosh Hashanah explained that. He said, this din of Sofo l'hispashit, he says, it's not a ChaNaN din. He said, it has nothing to do with ChaNaN. He says, there's a Tosfos in Baba Kama, okay? It says, it has nothing to do with the ChaNaN. This is a general din that when we look at things, we don't judge them in mid-process. We wait till it's over. Okay, Tosfos says it in Keilim and Mikvois. Okay, for Keilim, the din is that when if two things that are not supposed to be planted next to each other grow more than a 200th, then if it's more than 200th, then it's not batel. And if it's less than 200th, then it is batel. So he says, wait a second. Things don't grow in 1 second. It takes time for something to grow. So the first bit it grew was less than the 200th. Another bit, less than 200, less than 200. Keep being less than 200th. Every time it grows a fraction of a nothing. So it's less than 200th. So why don't you say it's always keeps being batel and batel and batel? So he says, no, of course not. He says, because but now when we came here today and we look at it and we say, oh, it's grown more than a 200th. All those 100 times that it took to grow here all go together. In the opposite case is a mikveh. It rains into the mikveh. So we should say is every drop of water that falls in should be batel. And each one drop is batel, another drop is batel, another drop say no. We don't look at it like that. We look at the whole thing. Yesterday it rained for 2 hours, and there was this much water fell in. So now we look at the water as a whole. Okay? So the Rosh Hashanah said because of that, it doesn't depend on how long the thing takes. The point when Tyson says Sofo l'hispashit, he says it has nothing to do with is it quick or slow. It has to do with is there a natural process that's going on that's gonna continue. If it's in the middle of a process that's on its way, Sofo l'hispashit, and we wait for to calculate the ChaNaN. He says if it's not a natural, someone had to stick their hands in and do something about it, then that's the end of the first process and we're on to the next. Then we say ChaNaN and go on to the next process. So the example of that is the gelatin, treif gelatin that's put into yogurt. He says so. I'm going to make up a case. Okay, let's say that there's you take a gallon of gelatin. Gelatin doesn't get measured in gallons, but to make it simple, I'm going to say gallons. Okay, a gallon of gelatin, and you want to mix it to make yogurt out of it. The gelatin is going to be a maimed of the yogurt. We don't care about the maimed. We're of course not going to eat the yogurt. We care about whether the Keilim became treif. Okay, maimed doesn't affect the Keilim. So we only care about the Keilim. So when they want to mix the gallon of gelatin into the yogurt, the way it's done in steps. In this case that I'm making up, they take a gallon of yogurt and put it into 20 gallons of milk to get it mixed in, and then the 20 gallons is mixed into another 200 gallons of milk to make the full batch of 220 gallons, and now it becomes they let that ferment into yogurt. So the 1 gallon of gelatin that's in there is batel b'shishim in the 220 gallons of yogurt. Because the 220 gallons of total milk, it's 1 in 220. Of course it's batel. But if we say ChaNaN, then the 1 gallon that went into 20 gallons, that wasn't batel. If we say ChaNaN, now we now have 21 gallons of treif over here, and now 21 gallons is not batel in 220 gallons. The 200 other gallons are coming afterwards. So then we say ChaNaN. So whether we should say ChaNaN or not, the way Shachta is explaining it, depends on how the process runs. If the gelatin goes into 20 gallons, and the process just continues by itself. First mix into 20, and then it would automatically go into the other 200. That's Sofo l'hispashit. It's one long process that's going on like that. But which is more common, after the 20 gallons are mixed, the guy pushes the button or does whatever he has to move it to the next stage, that's not Sofo l'hispashit. There's only Sofo l'hispashit if it's a natural process that just keeps on going. So I push the button to start the machine, and it does all the steps, that's fine. Then there's no ChaNaN. If if I stop in the middle, after 20 gallons, the guy says, okay, yeah, it's mixed well, hit the button to move to the next thing, then we would say ChaNaN. Okay, then we would potentially say ChaNaN. I'm going to tell you in a second why we shouldn't say ChaNaN, but that would be, then we would say, then Sofo L'Spashit would not apply in that case. That would not be a Heter to avoid saying ChaNaN.
So let's say that they're making a company, the milk is coming in, right? The milk is coming in into the liquefier, they call it the blender. They're hitting the powders in, with gelatin is, and it's going to flow in. The rest of the milk is going to flow in. It's going to flow through the pasture, and it's all coming in. It's being made on the fly, as they call that. They don't batch it. They don't just batch it all at once. It's making this on the fly, right? So that would be a case where we would be safe from the spashets, right? But then there's real life. In real life, for some reason, something happened, and the guy shut the milk off. The guy shut it in the flux of the milk, and now you have ingredients. It's not connected now to anything else. And you have an amount that it's not batel. So what do you say there?
So that's not Sofo L'Spashit.
That's not Sofo L'Spashit.
Right. So then it's over. Then ChaNaN happened. Now we made a
That's right, because the reason I said there's no you can't go with that. You can't go with the company and say, well, so it's a flowing process. It's on the fly.
You're saying because L'maisa it happened 100 times. So 3 times ago the guy stopped it in the middle or something went wrong or whatever. That's a good point. You're saying if we had just one situation, we could say it was Sofo L'Spashit, not Sofo L'Spashit. When we had 100 times, who knows paying attention to whatever. Okay, that's fine. So I hear that. Okay, we're going to hear in a second another reason why to maybe make. Okay, our last reason. Now like this. I told you last time that the Ramah says there's no ChaNaN by Yavish B'Yavish. Okay? And the reason is because there needs to be a transfer of time from one to the other, and by Yavish B'Yavish there's no transfer of time.
So since you premix over there, I was thinking about that when you were saying that you've got your
powdered premix?
Powdered premix. Yes, it wouldn't be ChaNaN really.
That's what we told last time, that Yavish, right, there's no ChaNaN because it's Yavish B'Yavish, correct.
How about you had the case today about vitamin premix, vitamin C.
Right, so in the footnotes over there it said, and you look later on today, you'll find out another reason for the maker, right? Correct, that's correct. Yes, you're right. Okay, so that's one, so if it's a Yavish, then there are those who say that, the Ramah says there's no ChaNaN. Okay. Some people take it a step further, and they say not only is it by Yavish, that's the last time we talked about Yavish B'Yavish, because there's nothing happens, because the powder's just touching each other, there's no time transfer. They say not only that, but there's another case where we also wouldn't say ChaNaN, and that is where liquids are mixed together. Cold liquids are mixed together, where there the toms are mingled, but they're not transferred of tom. Okay, that's what they want to say. If I mix blood with milk, then the blood is spread through the milk, but the milk didn't take a time. It's as if they're next to each other, but they're not getting time. As if they're like the case of powder. Of course, it's a little different, because here, the whole thing is one unit now together. But that's what some people want to say is that when it's cold liquids mixed together, there's no ChaNaN in that case also. So now, if so, in the case of the powders, that's what we also just said. In the case of the powders, both of these reasons would apply. It's a powders mixed together, and it's cold. It's being mixed together cold. So that would be a reason to make it. That theoretically a reason to make it. So Shafta said, since anyhow, balach, the Rambam says it's mutar b'diavad. ChaNaN balach is mutar b'diavad. This is not worse than lach balach. So he said that's okay. So you could be semach on that. Now, in the case where when we mix it with no heat, okay, before I get back to our case in a second, okay. Rabbi Heber had another example of where we would be saying ChaNaN of cold blends mixed together. Now listen to this case. There's in homeopathic, we talked about this some time ago, a long time ago, about homeopathic remedies. And the homeopathic remedies, the way they work is they mix the active ingredient, they mix the item that they're looking at, and they mix it in successive times. They don't mix the thing into an amount. They mix, in the case of what we're going to talk about is, I can't pronounce it, acylcarcinum, okay, which comes from a duck. Okay, so it's trafe. I can't pronounce it. It's a really long word. It starts with an O. Okay, and it's sold as 6X. What does 6X mean? X is like 10, like in Roman numeral X. X means 10. 6X means they take the duck extract, and they mix it into 10 times its volume of water or alcohol. And then they take that 10, so they took, let's say, 1 ounce of duck, and they mix it into 10 ounces of water. then they take that 10 ounces of water and mix into 10 times its volume. That's 100 ounces of water. Okay, so they do 6 times, that each time it's mixed into 10 times its volume. Okay, so 6x means each time is 10, and 6x means 6 times 10s. So what happens is at the end, the amount of duck in the 6x mixture is 1 in a million. Okay, if you go through the math, 6x comes out to 1 in a million. But if we say ChaNaN, then every time you only mix into 10 times. So mix into 10 is not batel. ChaNaN, okay, it's Issur. Mix into next, each time would be Issur. So we'd say at the end it would be 1 in a million, but we would still say ChaNaN, Chatichah. Each time, we have 6 ChaNaNs over here, and should not be batel. Okay, so over here, but it's being done in liquids. Okay, it's just cold liquids being mixed together. So here, he told me that Rav Heinemann said that's okay. You don't have to worry about ChaNaN in that case because of this thing that there's ChaNaN by liquids. You don't have to worry about. Okay, now not all homeopathics work like that.
Not so what? So there are more. It says you can. So perhaps that's only by hot lock. That's what we saw.
Right. That's what he'd be saying. That it's only with this. With hot. That's what these people say. It's a shadow. Not all the honey agree to this.
Something.
There's a Taz, Taz, Tesvav, and the Chatichah, Samachay, all kinds of people talk back and forth about it, okay? Maybe Rav Heinemann was also making because he's 1 in a million, it's getting a little carried away here, but I'm not sure. But the now in other homeopathic remedies, just to throw it in, they're not all X. Some of them are C. It could be like 4C. C means it's 100 times in each dilution. Okay, so 30C is like I forgot if I remember it's like 1 drop in the whole Pacific Ocean kind of thing. Like what I mean. So it's like way, but there even the first time it's batel because there's no even the first dilution is already 100 times. Okay. Anyhow. Okay, now so back to our gelatin and yogurt. If we'd be mako and say that there's no ChaNaN when we mix liquids together, when they're mixed together cold, the gelatin and the yogurt is also cold. So if we'd be willing to be mako for that case, we'd have another reason to be mako for the gelatin and the yogurt, even if it without Sofo was spashing, just because it's cold liquids being mixed together. That's another potential reason to be mako.